Hey everybody, welcome to my video on how to use the 5119 cameras, V810 Model 1. I figure, you know what, I've made so many video manuals about how other people's cameras work, maybe I should make one about how mine work. Only issue is I forgot to write a script, so we're doing this from memory. Let's see how it goes. All right, so the 5119 cameras, V810 Model 1 is a large format pinhole camera. It takes 8x10 film, that's this right here. Here's the huge opening of the negative, which is 8 inches by, well, slightly less than 8 inches by 10 inches. It uses a single pinhole right here to project an image onto the film with a very simple shutter. And I designed it. I'm very partial to the design and the interface, and I hope that if you have one and are using it, that you enjoy it as well. So, as we do, let's go over this camera. It is made of 7mm bamboo, and that's the housing. And if you have put it together yourself or bought one on the used market already assembled, it was sold as a build-at-home kit. It uses an internal felt lining instead of paint to reduce and eliminate light, which we can't really see because of the way the back is built, so you'll have to just trust me on that. Other than that, everything else on it is pretty much standard for large format cameras. It has a fixed focal length of, 324 millimeters. So basically that just means that the pinhole is 324 millimeters from the film plane. No, that's the image circle. Here it is, I thought that seemed long, 169 millimeter focal length. So the pinhole is 169 millimeters from the film plane. It uses a 0.55 millimeter aperture pinhole for an f307 aperture with an image diagonal that on the film, what the image diagonal means, usable image diagonal, is this corner to this corner is about 313 millimeters for 8x10 film. This creates a circle that is 324 millimeters, telling you that your image diagonal is within the optimum image illumination for this format. The image circle will actually go beyond 324 millimeters. That's just the maximum usable image circle at this focal length with this aperture pinhole. So basically, could theoretically have gone wider, but the image quality would have degraded way too much. The angle of view on the camera is 88 degrees. So as we do, we'll start here on the top of the camera. So the top of the camera has this bubble level right here and these sighting lines. When you're out in the field using your camera, you'll have it on your tripod. You'll put your eye back here, and what you'll do is you'll move it over to the side here to look down the sighting lines like that, or you can keep it in the middle. I find it a little bit easier to have my eyes looking in a straight line for the sighting lines. And then you'll know what's in the frame. I tend to frame slightly inside of the sighting lines just to give myself a little bit of room for cropping. And then the bubble level here will allow you to ensure that you position your camera so that it's level. On the front, we have the shutter, just like that. That's how it's operated. These nuts allow you to adjust the shutter resistance. So if it's too loose, you can tighten it just a little bit. If it's too tight, you can loosen it just a little bit until it gives you the appropriate amount of resistance. This right here is pretty much perfect, I tend to think. The shutter is not going to open on its own if it's resting. It's actually not going to open on its own because of the way I designed these final shutters, but it's also not going to close on its own during a long exposure. There you go. So what you do is you just open it up, and that's how it works. This is a 52 millimeter filter thread that can take wide-angle lens hoods, lens caps, as well as 52 millimeter filters. On the side here, we have the data block, camera make and model. all of your appropriate information. So if you use the very, very good Pinhole Calculator app, it is this app right here. So if you use this app and you sneak a peek at all of the prototypes I have in design, then you can enter this data into this app right here, your aperture, your focal length, and everything. And then you can adjust your film ISO and calculate your sunny day exposure. So, or if you're indoor, you can also, if you want, use this app's calculator for additional light meter readings. If you don't have this app, when we get to the back of the camera, I'll show you how to use this in full sun. Tripod socket. On the other side of the camera, we have another set of sighting lines and another bubble level. These sighting lines are a little bit harder to use if you just set your eye right behind them because of this. So that's another reason why it's a good idea to move your head and look directly down the sighting lines when you're using these, because the tripod socket is on the other side, bubble level here. On the camera's bottom, tripod socket, sighting lines. This way, if you're using the camera to take images of something like a skyscraper or something high up, what you can do is crank your tripod up above your head or to where the base is in line with your head, and you can use the sighting lines on the bottom of the camera to sight up your scene. Then on the camera's back, we have your exposure calculator. Here's everything you need to know to take a picture in full sun. So this is your Sunny 16 exposure time. So basically, if you have 800 ISO film, you're going to shoot in full sun at 1/2 of a second with this camera. All right, let's say you're using 50 ISO film. Well, we know at 400 you're at a full second. This is 7 seconds right here. Now at 6 ISO, which is like a photo paper, you've now gotten into the range of minutes. So 6 ISO, which let's say you're using an Ilford photo paper, those are usually around 5 ISO in full sun, with daylight that is. That's going to be about 1:02 to 1:15 exposure. This does not take into account reciprocity failure, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. Let's say you're all the way down here at a 1 ISO film with something like a bromide paper, which are very, very slow photo papers. You're starting with a 6-minute exposure with this camera. So this is a long exposure camera. You really do need a tripod to make the most of it. So let's talk about reciprocity failure with these. So we'll go back to your example where you're shooting a 50 ISO film, okay? 7-second exposure. If you know that your film's reciprocity failure is 3 times the exposure reading when you're above 5 seconds, that means that you actually need a 21-second exposure in full sun with 50 ISO film. So just remember, when you're using this calculator, this is pre-reciprocity failure, because different films have different amounts of reciprocity failure. I couldn't possibly have developed a calculator that accounted for all of that, so you'll need to calculate your reciprocity failure based on your film. So that's everything that's on the camera. Inside of the camera, there is a wool gasket here that helps to keep your images from being ruined by light. You can't really see it. But then inside of the camera, there is a suede, a black textured suede that is glued onto the inside of the camera box. And that's very, very good at eliminating any sort of glare and improving contrast. Okay, great. Those are some really nice things, but how do we actually use this camera? Let's find out. Okay, so I've got here an 8x10 film holder. This is a film holder. I always call that the wrong thing. So what you do to load the film is you have your camera on your tripod. You're going to pull this part of the camera, the exposure calculator, outward just a hair. And this is a little bit tricky, I'm not going to lie, because it's so large. But what you do is you're just going to get the film holder into the camera. There we go. and now it's seated. Now you know that it's seated because if you look down here where that notch is removed, you can see that the base of the film holder is at the base of the camera. That's why these notches are removed, so that you can verify that you're seated properly. If your film holder has a gap along the bottom there, you need to lift up the back and tap it down a little bit more, because a gap there where your film holder does not touch the bamboo will result in a light leak, and it will ruin your image. So just be warned about that. Once you've got your film loaded, what you're going to do, as with any large format film holder, is you remove the dark slide. These cameras in general, all of them, are designed to hold the film holder tightly enough up against the back of the camera that you can just pull the dark slide out. However, I don't trust myself well enough to do that. I will often hold on to the film holder like this as I remove the dark slide, or do something like this. However, I need to position my hands with the way the camera is set up in the field. But one of the reasons that this wing is popping out of the side of the camera here is to give you a place to hold on to the film holder and the camera, so that you can know you're taking the film holder out of the camera without risking accidentally removing the film holder and ruining your film. Something I have had happen on other cameras that will not be named. So, okay, pull the dark slide out of our film. We know that we're using a 100 ISO film. I have a Delta 100 loaded in here. So, and it's full sun, very few clouds in the sky, just a handful of clouds off in the scene above some mountains. So we know that that's a 4-second base exposure reading. With Delta 100, we're going to double that. We're actually going to do an 8-second exposure with Delta 100. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to verify that we're comfortable with this, with the light that we have, and we're going to take our most important tool that we have, a watch with a second hand. And when it hits 0, we're going to open up the shutter. We're going to watch our second hand until it hits the 8-second mark, 7, 8. We're going to close the shutter. We're going to put the dark slide back in to the film holder, and then you can take the film holder out of the camera and either put it in the other direction or put it back in your bag if you've used both sides. There we go. Whew, this guy's going to be a little bit tougher than some of the others to put the film in and out of. Now, some adjustments. If your camera is really tough to get the film in and out of, it might just be that your shot cord is a little bit too tight, so you can always loosen that a little bit to make it a little bit easier. That's really the easiest thing to do. If your shot cord happens to break or fray, this is a 3mm or 1/8 inch shot cord, and you can simply buy some new and replace it. This uses 3 lengths of 11-inch shot cord from the knot to the other end, and then if there's excess after you tie it, you just cut off that excess from the knot and melt the end of the shot cord with a match. Really easy to do maintenance on. Likewise, like I said, you can adjust the resistance of your shutter here. One of the big things about your shutter is that because the tripod is right here, it's going to rest like this, okay, in landscape mode, which means you're going to be pushing down on the shutter to start the exposure. So as long as it doesn't fall back into place by itself during the exposure, it's got enough resistance. The reason the tripod socket is on this side instead of on this side is so that if it was on this side, if you could imagine the shutter being really loose and falling open while you were pulling the dark slide out or something, would completely ruin your image. So I designed that with as much image safety in mind as I could. And that is it. That is everything about these cameras. I designed them to be really simple and really user-friendly, and hopefully also really, really fun to use. They are big, but they take really, really nice photos. So I really do hope that if you've got one of these, you're using them. Feel free to drop photos you've taken with your 5119 cameras, the 810 Model 1, in the comments section of this video. I promise I'm going to look at every photo that you take and post with this camera. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track producing content which is useful and helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about checking these every couple of days and answering questions. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future videos, and if I have the technical know-how and equipment, I'm more than happy to make those. One last thing. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I gotta get up, Steinbeck. I have to turn off the camera.